Om Satyena Labhyas Tapasa Hyesa Atma Samyagyanena Brahmacharyena Nityam Antaha Sharirehi Jyotirmayo Hi Shubraha Yam Pashanti Yatayaha Kshinadoshaha Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. The Atman, the indivisible self in all beings, is realized by austerity, veracity, right knowledge, and moderation, all constantly cultivated. When the impurities of the mind dissolve due to this practice, the seer beholds it everywhere and in everything, even here in this very life, body, and mind. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahoy Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvi Shavahoy. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all living beings. Om Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. So today we're going to take up the Kriya Yoga. And this is something that we have heard about, studied. We know that we're participating, practicing it, but we're really going to savor it tonight and look at it in a number of different dimensions. Let's take a look first at where is it? At the verse that inspires this particular study. Okay, so we were in verse 14, and backing up a little bit, the poet of this, the singer of this song, so to speak, had some difficulties with the 9 distractions in spiritual life, which are the antarayas. And as a result of that, those kinds of distractions, which include doubt and complacency and other issues, Bhranti Darshana, confusion of philosophy, that doubt about his teacher arose in his mind. And he put that to death by using the 4 qualities of the authentic spiritual teacher, which we covered pretty well a couple classes ago. But the thing that came up for him then was this shame that he ever would have had this doubt to begin with. And as he looked at this problem of shame, it made him recognize again come to know the 8 fetters of human nature, things like anger, hatred, pride of caste, pride of lineage, things of that nature, along with shame and secrecy. And so learning about that, he quelled it by the triple tenet of Kriya Yoga and other salient practices. So this is important because one of the last things that was said in the last class of this series was that by engaging in Kriya Yoga, we naturally begin to dissolve such things as the 8 fetters, the 6 passions, the 9 antarayas, and we even get to the heart of the 5 kleshas. So, and the kleshas are the ignorance, egotism, attachment, aversion, and clinging to life. So these are all very core, with those 5 kleshas, everything else comes tumbling out, including the evolutes of Maya, which we also studied. So one of the purposes of studying the encomium in a savoring manner is to not lose track of what we've studied in the past, but weave them back together again so that we keep them fresh. And these are like so many swords for our spiritual practice. So then what we're going to discuss Kriya Yoga. I already did kind of a summary of it in the last class where I aligned it with the practice that we get at the time of initiation, where we're given the mantra, that's Svadhyaya. We're given a meditation practice that is like our austerity. We're given a mantra for our ideal, and that's both Svadhyaya and Ishvara Pranidhana. So we're given this at the very beginning, but now from the standpoint of yoga, traditional yoga, like out of the Yoga Sutras and what Patanjali teaches us and what the commentators and especially Vedavyas have presented to us, I'm going to share some things. So one of the things that is talked about by the commentators is that the 8 limbs of yoga can be divided into the external portion and the internal portion. So let me just kind of bring up the chart on the 8 limbs just so that we can refer to it. So the external limbs, in this way of looking at it, and all of this, and I should also say that all of this relates to adhikara. What are our qualifications? And depending upon what our qualification is, that's where our focus is going to be. So the external limbs are the first 5, the yamas, the niyamas, posture, breathing, and sense control. In other words, so yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, and pratyahara. These are the 5 external limbs. And the internal limbs are the ones where once we have learned to concentrate the mind, withdraw it from the objects, both gross and subtle, then we enter into this ekagra, the capacity to enter into the ekagra state of mind, one-pointed. And from there, we engage in dharana, which is concentration, dhyan, which is meditation, and samadhi, absorption. So in the layout of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, the first pada is called the Samadhi pada. And this is where he tells us what yoga is. Yoga is samadhi. And everything that's taught in the first chapter, that first pada, has to do with the nature of samadhi and its different aspects. And as far as a method goes, it's practice of samadhi or practice of concentration and renunciation. So the ones who are qualified for that already have their minds, as Vyasa puts it, harmonized by samadhi. So there's a Sanskrit phrase for that, which is samahita chitta, samahita chitta. So we have now the 8 limbs, the 8 limbs divided into 1 through 5, which are the external aspects, and then the internal. So there are 3 levels of aspirants that they talk about. And the highest level is the one who can just jump into that first chapter of yoga and continue on their way. But for everybody else, and they're the ones who have that samahita chitta, a mind harmonized in samadhi already. And the others there's a word for it that means outward facing. And so these are those who, and there's two classes of them, those who are yearning, are wanting to get on the path and to advance, but they're at the very, very beginning stages. And then there's the next level, which has made some, who have made some advances and need to go further. So for them, we have chapter 2. Patanjali gave us this chapter 2, and the very first 2 verses are all about Kriya Yoga. So Kriya Yoga, in case it doesn't just pop into your mind right away, that's austerity, study of scripture, recitation, and worship, devotion, self-surrender to God, and surrender of the fruits of actions. So all of this goes to show, and then these practices are the very foundation for moving through the first 5 and the other 3. So for those who aren't ready to do the internal higher 3 limbs of yoga, there is this practice for everyone else. So one of the things that Babaji says about Kriya Yoga is that these 3 make up a healthy spiritual life. And if we think about it, for as long as each of us have known Babaji, he's constantly talking about these 3, our austerity, which is control of the mind, and we're going to get into more of that later, and our study of the scripture and memorization, and then also our cultivating devotion and self-surrender to our chosen ideal. So the purpose of Kriya Yoga is samadhi. And it's also said that even though somebody might be at that middling level of qualification where the mind is still outgoing, but one is gaining ground in the ability to bring the mind to a one-pointed state, they're maturing all the impurities of the mind or dissolving them, that the purpose is still ultimately samadhi. And even those at this middling and intermediate level, if they advance far in Kriya Yoga, if their practice is intense, then even before they reach that higher state, they can attain to samadhi. So that's put out there. I'm just checking my notes here. Okay. So I also want to bring in Swami Vivekananda from his work on in Raja Yoga. And in the section, chapter 2 of the Yoga Sutras, the first and second verses having to do with Kriya Yoga, he makes this statement. Most of us make our minds like spoiled children, allowing them to do whatever they want. Therefore, it is necessary that Kriya Yoga should be constantly practiced in order to gain control of the mind and bring it into subjection. The obstructions to yoga arise from lack of control and cause us pain. They can only be removed by denying the mind and holding it in check through the means of Kriya Yoga. So the obstructions to yoga, when we hear that, that's English for the antaryayas, all those, and also for the kleshas. So they arise from lack of control. It also can remind us of Sri Ramachandra, where he says, ignorance continues in the lack of discriminative wisdom. So this is very, very similar, very related. So let's take a quick look, not a quick look, let's take a look now at the Kriya Yoga system. And the quotes that Babaji has here are from Vedavyas. So, as he points out, these are he's the father of Vedanta, commenting on the father of yoga's sutras. And actually, before we do that, I want to show us, where is that? Okay. Let me move this over. I want to show us these, oh no, there's a better way. Sorry, folks. I have something for you, anyone who wants it. And that's Babaji's commentary on verse 1 and 2 from the second chapter. And if anyone wants it, I will send it to them. So just go ahead and text me tonight and I'll send it to you, or email me. Either way is fine. So what I want to show here is this first verse. The yoga of conscious action, that's Kriya Yoga, is performed via austerities and study of scriptures, all performed in the atmosphere of devotion to God. Often when we think of Kriya Yoga, those of us who are familiar with it, we're just going to list the 3 ingredients. But to have it laid out like this is very important, all performed in the atmosphere of devotion to God. Years ago, at the first pilgrimage that Babaji led to India, Lex was on that. And I remember sitting at the guest house at Bellarmont, and Lex was at the head of the table, and people were asking him questions. And one of the questions they asked was, why, when so much emphasis is being given to the Jnana Yoga, why is it that Sri Ramakrishna said that the path of the age is bhakti? And we're all busy studying the scriptures, but bhakti is the discipline, the yoga of the age. And Lex didn't even skip a beat, and he said, it's because all the other yogas are to be done in bhakti, in that flavor, that atmosphere of devotion. So, and that really comes right out of the way Vyasa also talks about this. So let's take this to heart. The yoga of conscious action is performed via austerities and study of scriptures, all performed in an atmosphere of devotion to God. So with that as our basis, now let's take a look at these 3, the way they're laid out here in Babaji's chart. So the triple tenet of Kriya Yoga, the first one is tapas, and we're going to spend some time on this tapas. First, let's just see what Vedavyas says about it here. These are austerities or ascetic practices that purify the mind without taxing the body. The spiritual life of a non-ascetic neither progresses nor succeeds, and without purification, karmas, kleshas, and vashanas only increase, creating a net which cannot be loosened or broken. But Patanjali avers, that so long as the body is not overtaxed, the sincere tapasvin, ascetic, should practice austerity for purification of the mind. So this tells us immediately why this tapas is so important, because there's no progress without it. So what does he mean when he says, without purification, karmas, kleshas, and vashanas only increase? So this gets to a particular teaching that comes up in other commentaries that has to do with the beginningless nature of karmas, the beginningless nature of these kleshas, ignorance, egotism, attachment, aversion, and clinging to life. Also, they sometimes refer to it as afflictions. the 9 antaryayas that we've studied so much already. These are beginningless because of the beginningless relationship between Purusha and Prakriti. So we know that the Yoga Sutras, traditional yoga, is based heavily on the Samkhya Yoga. So here we should now think back to the tenets, the 10 fundamental tenets of Samkhya. So before we take a look at those, let's just take a look at this. So this beginninglessness, this eternal relationship within the personality, this eternal relationship between the Purusha and Prakriti initiates the impurity, which becomes more complex as it takes a diversity of forms, okay? So if we have the wrong relationship going on between Purusha and Prakriti, remember that Prakriti is supposed to serve Purusha. It has no other purpose. Purusha is not an agent. It's not Prakriti. It's eternally separate, even though it associates and has a relationship. It's still eternally separate. So when we have this wrong relationship going on, then we desire things that are external, and we create actions that are karma bearing, or we assume that we are. So we're going to take a look at this in a little more detail. So, but let's continue with this. This eternal relationship within the personality initiates the impurity, which becomes more complex as it takes a diversity of forms. And this diversity of forms means actions leading to karmas, afflictions, which can mean the kleshas, ignorance, egotism, attachment, aversion, and clinging to life, and propensities, in other words, samskaras. So, and everything, as we know, gets more convoluted, complicated, and it creates that net that was talked about in Vedavyasa's quote here, that karmas, kleshas, and vasanas only increase, creating a net which cannot be loosened or broken. So let's take a further look at this alongside these 10 tenets of Samkhya. Remember that Purusha exists for no other entity. Matter or nature exists to serve Purusha because it's the only sentient reality. Purusha is distinct. Purusha is not an agent of action. So those are the main ones that are going to be backwards when we take a look at this. So again, this is about why tapas, this austerity, which means basically control of the mind and discipline that is steady, why it is so essential. The beginningless relationship between Purusha and Prakriti has to be altered so as to make Prakriti serve Purusha's purpose and not vice versa. All right, that's a restatement of what we've been saying. Next, the complex forms of the impurity of a wrongly apprehended relationship, right? So we've turned things around, and Purusha is thinking that it's nature and that it has to engage in all this stuff and identifies with it. So this wrongly apprehended relationship that have resulted in past actions, so sakama karmas, actions done with selfish or self-centered motives, leading to current afflictions, i.e. negative karmas and strengthening of the kleshas, and propensities, vasanas, which are desires, samskaras, which are desire-based imagination and thinking. All this towards wrong choices in the future must be unraveled and impurities washed away. Okay, so that's all very much a mouthful. One more time. The complex forms of the impurity of a wrongly apprehended relationship that have resulted in past actions leading to current afflictions and propensities towards wrong choices in the future must be unraveled and impurities washed away, while at the same time, the habit pattern, i.e. samskaras, that makes the personality draw the impurities constantly from exterior objects of sense attractions must be changed by closing the sense channels so that this net in which beings become caught may be broken. Again, another mouthful, because these things are being stated in a way that we don't normally run our minds down. So the habit pattern. Okay, so I've got a samskara that causes me to take a look at external nature and immediately think that I am an agent of action and that these things either attract or repel me, that I want these things or I am averse to these things. So these sense attractions and aversions must be changed by closing the sense channels so that this net in which beings become caught may be broken. And so simply put, what he's saying here is that this is when initially in formal practice, we're sitting there and we're withdrawing the mind from the sense objects. We're drawing our senses from the objects and dissolving the organs of the sense back into the mind. We're not allowing the mind to think about external objects or internal objects. And this is closing the sense channels so that we don't keep all of these afflictions and kleshas and samskaras efflorescing. So Swamiji says that tapas is control of the mind, making it hold the reins of the senses like rest of horses. This is the essential discipline. So, and this is in opposition or in contrast, I should say, to those who will want to talk about fasting and other extreme physical practices. This one, it's a mental thing. So there was a chart I wanted to show with regards to that. This is a war horse, but I want to flash it for those down the road who will not have seen it at least. And so this is what Swamiji is talking about here. So, and he's using the metaphor of the 5 horses with Sri Krishna representing the intellect and Arjuna here representing the Purusha. And it's the intellect that has to hold the reins that go out towards the horse of hearing who wants to go towards the objects of hearing, and also the horse of feeling that wants to go to the objects of the sense of feeling. And here we have the broad tattvas of those: ether, air, fire, water, and earth. In practice, though, you know, the sense of feeling, we want to withdraw our minds from the sense of textures and heat and cold, with hearing, from all the different kinds of sounds that we can listen to. We want to hold it and not let the energy, the prana of the mind, move out through those things. Tasting, neither do we want to let the mind go out through the sense of taste to the objects of taste, of tasting, or smelling, etc., or seeing, which is probably the biggest one. Seeing and hearing, as far as the formal practice of meditation, is going to be 2 of the hardest, because it's pretty easy to step away from your kitchen, pretty easy to put yourself in a room and not be smelling anything other than incense, etc. So anyway, so this is controlling the mind. And we do this also with the reins of prana, but we want to get a hold of that as we are concentrating the mind and we're putting the kibosh in our practice on letting the mind go out. That is actually getting control of the reins of prana. And anytime it escapes, we know it because the energy of the mind, the prana of the mind, goes out through the senses again. And this gets us also the reins of the tanmatras from those thoughts of the objects in the mind. So ego, intelligence, and mind, it's the intellect in particular that's going to be the controller. And the Purusha is along for the ride. So this is that practice that Swamiji is talking about. So then in our SRV mode, Babaji always brings up for us the threefold austerity of sattvic beings according to Sri Krishna. And this really also kind of puts the one of the final touches on austerity. So worship of the gods, when we look at austerity of the body, we see that it has to do with worship of the gods, reverence for the wise, purity of act, uprightness, and non-injury. So, I thought I had a quote here. Yeah, Babaji actually summarizes this in worship of the gods of the wise, the search for purity, and upright attitude, sexual moderation, and refraining from harming all beings. In his commentary, I'll be drawing even more in the others for that. Yeah, and then you can also read it yourself if you ask for those two commentaries that I mentioned. So the austerity of speech is truthful speech, beneficial speech, inspiring speech, calming speech, and sacred recitation. In this svadhyaya, it's also talked about, that we're doing japa of the mantra, and as we do in SRV, we focus on certain verses out of the Upanishads, out of the Bhagavad Gita, out of the Tantras, even out of the Yoga Sutras that Babaji has presented to us for memorization and contemplation, as well as recitation. In the commentaries that I read, they also mentioned preliminaries. So that might mean, that would mean things like the Purusha Suktam and other famous, beautiful hymns of praise, that these would be chanted and recited because they enhance, just like the other ones that I mentioned, the other chants, they enhance the sattvic quality of the mind. So the other thing about these is that they do not, all these different kinds of speech, inspiring, calming, etc., they do not create karma, and they quell karma arising around us and around others who are near us. So then the austerity of mind is silence of thought, gentleness, mental control, fresh disposition, and selflessness. This silence of thought is also very important. It's pointed out also in the different commentaries that without this silence of thought, one will not have the ability to concentrate on svadhyaya, right, on the practice of study of the scriptures. Okay, so this is the threefold austerity of sattvic beings according to Sri Krishna. And now we're going to go ahead and take a look at Svadhyaya. And here's where I'm pulling especially from Babaji's commentary. So in Svadhyaya, oh, this is actually from Footfalls, it turns out. Vedavyas says of Svadhyaya, it is twofold. First, the scriptures themselves have to be taken up, studied, memorized, and contemplated. Secondly, there should be recitation of mantras, slokas, and the bijam Om. These are to be performed daily, along with examination of Om's three matras, A, U, and M, and what they each signify. Further instructions on how to achieve all of this are to be heard from the lips of an illumined preceptor. Without clarification of the meaning of mantras, bijams, dharma teachings, and scriptures by the teacher, one's spiritual practice will be, as Vashishta has stated, as futile as trying to grow crops only at night. So all of this is in Babaji's commentary in Footfalls on the Kriya Yoga chart, for those who want to look that up. I think they're, hang on, let's take a look also at that chart. Right. So I had a note to myself, you know, at the retreat that some of us were at over, not last weekend, but the weekend before, Babaji gave us a sheet on the teachings of Om as presented by Gaudapada in his Karika. And I found it personally very, very helpful, especially with the idea that as we repeat Om, thinking of it in terms of A, U, and M, waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, that Gaudapada emphasized that, you know, as we chant Om, and the A part of it takes us through all that can be seen and experienced in the waking state, but it only becomes completed by merging into the U of Om. So then the U of Om takes in all the, you know, infinitude, shall we say, relatively speaking, the infinitude of subjective awareness, everything that can be thought about the past, about the future, and about the present, and it was very interesting how it was put, all the feelings, thoughts that are incommunicable in the present, all of this makes up our subjective experience and the subjective experience of all beings. And then that completes itself by dissolving into M, the M of Om, dissolution, where having dissolved into just its sheer potential, then we are in the realm of pure awareness, but still where there's the experiencer and the experience. That is only transcended in Turiya. But so when we engage in Svadhyaya in this very classical, traditional way, and we chant Om, we can, borrowing from this teaching, if we haven't been doing it this way already, make sure that we are contemplating knowing that it completes itself in you, and that all of subjective awareness completes itself in dissolution, and that pure awareness then has to lead to Turiya through. There's a very beautiful way he puts that. contemplative. It's also very interesting. He said, and this is after he's talked about A, U, and M, at a very advanced stage, all efforts and processes have to be dropped, and a sudden awakening will occur. And here's the important point. Awakening is not an experience. Any experience, no matter how refined or subtle, even an experience of pure bliss without any structures, falls in the mode of relative experience, which includes the subtle duality of experiencer and what is experienced. I'm not seeing this other thing I was looking for, but anyway, I hope that you found that interesting and helpful. So that is what we have to say about Svadhyaya. Let's see what they each signify. Further instructions. Yes. Okay. You know, going back to that threefold austerity that Sri Krishna put out, that austerity of the body, worshiping the wise and reverence, worshiping the gods and reverence for the wise. You know, what's being implied here also is the importance of holy company so that we can be in the atmosphere of these teachings and solidify them, assimilate them better. So that to me is also very much a part of Svadhyaya. So now the third component is Ishvara Pranidhana, which has two facets. And let me share my screen again. Devotion in all its aspects, along with self-surrender to Ishvara. One's daily practices of yoga, replete with all the various movements and actions of one's life, and even the very energy with which one engages one's existence, plus the fruits of all acts, all these are to be offered to God. This is Ishvara Pranidhana. And remember, and this is what he's saying, that all of our austerities, all of our svadhyaya, and all of our daily acts are to be done in this atmosphere, this practice of Ishvara Pranidhana. Renouncing the results and the fruits thereof. So in short, spiritual practitioners, and I'm quoting, I think, from Babaji here, spiritual practitioners are to accomplish sadhana of all the yogas in the atmosphere of devotion to God, otherwise known as the Supreme Guru. It is likened to growing crops in rich soil. Doing austerity and study devoid of this beneficial atmosphere would be like growing crops in depleted soil, lacking in nutrients. Further, even the yoga of meditation, Dhyan yoga, progresses at a swifter, fuller pace if devotion to the Lord is reserved and held in the heart. So one of the things also that came out in some of the commentaries I was looking at is that this Ishvara Pranidhana is like a great resolve. In our relationship with our teacher and with the supreme teacher standing behind, when we engage in our practice, it all kind of starts with making sure that our formal practice is partaking of this Ishvara Pranidhana. Maybe we'll have such a sense of agency at the time that maybe we forget that. But this resolve, it's almost like taking a vow to one's teacher and to the teacher of all teachers that I'm going to perform these practices to the very best of my ability. And I'm not going to swerve from the path for the amount of time that is allotted for this formal practice, I'm going to give it all the energy and all the concentration that I can muster. So in this context, this resolve, where Ishvara Pranidhana is also this resolve taken under the auspice of the Guru, and we refresh it at each formal practice, Babaji gave us a really wonderful chart on this, which again is another warhorse. But I think after the retreat we just had and what I've just shared from the commentaries, this will resonate even more deeply. So this is the preliminary practices to mantra and meditation. And before we launch into it, I want to tell another story from experiences at the start of SRV. So again, back at that very first pilgrimage with Babaji and with Lex, and also with Baba Trinima. Baba Trinima and I, we were sort of like a triputi with Babaji. And we would get up in the morning after practicing the mantra and the Gayatri mantra. We would meet together for Svadhyaya with Babaji. And he, at the very start of it, he taught us the Om Sahana Bhavatu. And this was very important because he wanted to instill in us, who were brand new to this tradition, he wanted to instill in us this practice that we would differentiate the svadhyaya, the spiritual practice, the spiritual reading and study from any other kind of earthly or worldly reading that we would do. And one of the first things he said was, no tea, no drinks, no food, no distractions. And before you begin, you repeat. And then he taught us Om Sahana Bhavatu. May Brahman protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with the teachings. May we not find fault with the teacher. May we gain great strength. These are some of the other aspects of that mantra. So he taught that to us so that we would make initially a clear distinction. Now, as practitioners mature, pretty soon everything gets done in this spirit. But in the beginning, we need to make this distinction so that it is special and that we are bringing a fresh energy to it. So in that context, let's take a look at these. Let's begin with, we'll read the quote afterwards. So before we begin our practice, our formal practice in the day, we would make a practice of awakening consciously each day. That's waking up, and if we went to sleep doing our mantra, hopefully it means waking up with our mantra. If we went to sleep saying, I'm going to awaken fresh and awake for the new day and begin my practice of meditation and chanting, etc. So we awaken consciously each day, and we set this up the night before. Then purificatory bath and rituals. We may not all have those, but we can incorporate them with at least washing our face and our hands and feeling that we are purifying our body. Pranams, prostrations at the altar. If we've been doing this for many, many years, and maybe we've kind of plateaued out, we have to watch out for that. So when we bow down, we want to make it living. Make sure that we are connecting and feeling the presence of our chosen ideal in our heart as well as at the altar, and feel that connection. I remember Swami Asheshanandaji telling me, feel that your chosen ideal is placing his, her hand on your head. So, so we do those prostrations at the altar with heartfelt devotion. Dirga Pranava, so then a long recitation of Om. And that's where we can bring back, if we aren't doing it that way already, this idea of completing each of the three matras, contemplating it in the process. The other thing that's important about, that was very important, is that this is the bijam of Brahman. And one of the things Babaji said that I have in my notes from the retreat is that just like when we think tree, we think green. When we think Brahman, we think Om. So Om and Brahman, identical. Then a prayer for the fulfillment of our practice. How does he put it? This is where it's good to take a look at the quote at the top. So praying for the fulfillment of one's aspirations. Okay, that's this prapati. And you can also, at the same time, also pray for the spiritual aspirations of all other beings as well. Samarpana, offering one's life to God. This is really important. This will help us in that practice of Ishvara Pranidhana, not just in our formal practice, but as we go out into the day. So we're offering our life. I mean, what does that mean to offer our life? That means it doesn't belong to us. Who are we, right? these individualized selves that rise and fall. We are that one reality. And in the beginning, we tend to look at that only as our chosen ideal, or primarily as our chosen ideal. So we are offering our life to our chosen ideal, that it may express through us. Purusha Yagya, dedicating the soul to God. Guru Pranam, salutations to one's guru and the gurus of one's gurus, the whole lineage, because that, recognizing our connection to our teacher, our teacher's teacher, and so forth, this makes us live that Guru Parampara, the connection between the whole lineage right down to ourselves. And then, and also in the yoga tradition, they'll say that the guru, the living, the embodied guru, as well as the guru of all gurus, teacher of all teachers, that all of our success comes under their auspices. And why else would Vashishta say that study of the scriptures without a teacher is like trying to grow crops only at night? So there's, the guru is the great blessing on our spiritual lives. And then finally, speaking of resolve, each one of these can be thought of as a resolve. And then Utsaha Vrata is the vow of enthusiasm, to infuse sadhana, our sadhana, with enthusiasm. So, in summary, rising each morning with a desire to engage in the creative process, taking one's bath consciously and for the purpose of purification, prostrating before the deities, chanting one long recitation of Om, praying for the fulfillment of one's and others' aspirations, offering life and soul to God, saluting the Guru and the Gurus of the Guru, and vowing to infuse daily sadhana with verve and vigor. This is the ninefold practice of a sincere spiritual aspirant prior to japa of the mantra and formless meditation. So, and then in closing, I want to read this quote out of one of my sources. When practices are done with the attitude of their being and offering to God, This attitude extends into daily life, and Kriya Yoga naturally and effortlessly becomes Karma Yoga. Hence the acts outside of daily yoga practice itself are also surrendered to God. So those of you who have membership on the SRV Wisdom, you can go up there. There's a very beautiful and relevant God blog today having to do with Ishvara. And it's called Learning About the Personal God. And let me just read it. It's very, very short. Let me just read the quote from Sri Ramakrishna that it's based upon. If you do not accept God with form, that is all right. That only means that the image is not meant for you. Just deepen your feeling for your own ideal. But from the worshipers of the personal God, you should learn of their yearning, how much they love the deity. Is love not a good thing? You should accept that feeling, even if you do not accept the image. So, and Babaji goes on to say, there is hardly any more effective method or force to remove barriers over veiled human awareness than intense yearning. What razor-sharp non-dual wisdom is to the Gyanis, this intense yearning is to the Bhaktas. The more focused and centered it is, the more likely it is that the divine beloved will thereby emerge from hiding behind the coverings of nature and people's limited mental projections. Ironically, it is this higher form that will remove all the other forms that people here covet and attach to. Attraction to it will completely take away obsession for all that is unreal and insentient. Anyway, there's more of that to read, and you can do that on SRV Wisdom. So let me close with a chant. Om Masato Masat Tamaso Ma Jyotir Gamoya, Mrichor Ma Amritam Gamoya, Abhira Bhira Maeti, Rudra Yate Dakshinamukam, Tenamam Pahinicham. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Lead us from lower truth to higher truth, from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from the illusion of death to realization of eternal existence. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother of the universe, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all living beings. Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Tat Sat.